Science today confirms that when a rib is removed from a human, it regrows. In fact, if a rib is removed, it will regrow completely in about 6 months.
If you remove an arm, if you remove, whatever bone you choose, it will not grow back.
A salamander's tail, if it's cut off, will regenerate. A sea star's legs, if cut off, will regenerate. You also have a body part that can regenerate. Your rib bones. If a surgeon removes one of your lower rib bones, it will regenerate. One surgical procedure used by doctors is called a split rib cranioplasty. Doctors have reconstructed the skulls of injured patients using donated rib bone. All patients had complete regeneration of the donor rib. Another surgical procedure that uses the rib bones is called thoracoplasty. Amazingly, ribs grow back, and when they do, they will grow back straight. Within only a few weeks of losing a piece of limb, a salamander perfectly reforms the missing structure. This is a useful trait for the salamander. But why would men benefit from regenerating their ribs? Long before modern medicine, internet and video, radio, and electronics, long before modern technology, a text was written that explained how a regenerating rib could be useful. Around 3,460 years ago, these words were inscribed by a man named Moses to describe how a woman was created out of man.
And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, This is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man.
Bone marrow transplantation.
The term bone marrow transplant always brings up the image of someone going into an operating room and having the bone marrow put in. But it is not that. It's actually much more like a blood transfusion.
Dr. Dennis Gastineau says bone marrow is the spongy tissue inside some bones. Its job is to produce blood cells.
Bone marrow can actually be infused back into your body. It can help regrow other organs. You'll find there are 5 common donor sites: the cranium, the sternum, the vertebrae, the pelvis, and you guessed it, the rib. So now, think about it. If you were going to take a donor site for bone marrow transplantation, would you want to mess with their skull, their sternum, their pelvis, their vertebrae, or what about this rib? Oh yeah, it also grows back. Now, whether you get them from the bones or whether you get them from the blood, that's the 2 differences. But stem cells can actually regrow organs.
And I put my finger and I said, you need to get rid of that airplane. And that's when I cut my finger off. It took off probably about that much of the finger.
You can understand why doctors said he'd lost it for good. But it grew back with the help of a mystery powder. Normally, when we're wounded, we scar. But the scientists say putting the extracellular matrix on the wound stimulates the cells to regrow instead. They hope the technique might one day work on organs and possibly more.
We build it up, so there are a number of layers that we make to be able to create the 3-dimensional bit. So these are the cartilage constructs which will become the 2 new ears. And then we place the framework of the ear underneath the skin, and then we suck the skin down so it conforms to the contours of the framework.
We have a book written 3,000 years ago by Moses that somehow records how an open body surgery would take place before anesthesia is even developed. He picked the one bone out of 206 that regenerates itself. Then the whole idea of taking a bone and making another person, it seems completely far-fetched at the time.
Dr. Anthony Atala runs the Wake Forest Institute for Regenerative Medicine in North Carolina. You name the body part, chances are Dr. Atala is trying to grow one.
Currently at the Institute, we're working on over 22 different tissues and organs.
So, bladder?
Yes.
Heart? Liver?
Yes. Kidneys, lungs. The possibilities really are endless.
Dr. Atala presides over the world's largest lab devoted to bioengineering body parts. He's made everything from components of fingers to kidneys. It's enough to make Dr. Frankenstein jealous. Slightly spooky, isn't it?
It is.
Dr. Atala says every organ in our body contains special stem cells that are unique to each body part. The key to regeneration, he says, is to isolate and then multiply those cells until there are enough to cover a mold of that particular body part. What is growing here?
That is actually a bladder, and you can see here that we actually create a three-dimensional mold first. This is actually coated with cells, and it's done one layer at a time. It's very much like baking a layered cake.
It's sort of surgery as pastry making. But how do those cells know? It's a really stupid question, I understand, but how do the bladder cells know that they should be functioning as bladder cells?
Every single cell in your body has all that genetic information to create a whole new you. So if you place that cell in the right environment, it'll be programmed to do what it's supposed to do.
Reprogramming the cell basically turns a skin cell into an induced pluripotent stem cell. As you probably know, stem cells can then be reprogrammed into any cell the body needs, and it does all this without hurting the patient, or having to take the cells out of the body, which is how we currently do stem cell therapy.
Dr. Atala says some body parts are more simple to make than others.
This is actually an ear mold, and you can see here the mold shaped like an ear. And then what we do is we start seeding these with cells, and then this is actually the fully engineered ear.
This technology allows any cell to turn into a stem cell, provided of course it's a dividing cell. Skin cells naturally replenish, so they are a perfect fertile land where elements of any new organ can be grown. In this study, the team was able to reprogram skin cells to become vascular cells in a mouse's leg that was in need of better blood flow. In 2 weeks, the leg was saved. Skin cells reprogrammed into nerve cells were also able to repair the brains of mice recovering from strokes.
But why would humans have evolved or be designed to have regenerating ribs? The best logical explanation is that the book of Genesis, written thousands of years ago, is an accurate record of how people were created by God. And specifically, God took a rib from man to make the first woman, so that the first man would not be incomplete. His rib grew back. If God made woman from man, why would God make her from a bone in man's side? Woman was not made for man's head to rule over him. Woman was not made for man's feet to be trampled upon. If God made woman from man's side, maybe it was because man should keep his woman near his side to be his companion and near his heart to be loved.